We are now on Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. And the title of our short devotional is The Fullness Thereof. Let me read to you the passage before we start. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9 to 10. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Have you ever wondered how the land and seas were formed? There are a lot of people that explain specific details on how the earth was formed, especially the ground and the seas. A scientist makes also their hypothesis that water came from a comet or asteroid that collided in the earth billions of years ago, and that was the cause of how we have now what we call seas. Is it true? How many of us believe in that? What does the Bible tell us about how God founded or established the land and seas? Let's find out. How the dry land and the seas were formed. This is day 3 of God's creation. God created two marvelous things. Number 1, God created a dry ground, which we call land. And number 2, God also created seas. As we recall in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, the waters were already there in the empty, dark, formless surface of the earth. And God was hovering, meaning God is moving to and fro. And after that, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Verse 3. God separated the light from the darkness. Verse 4. Then the light he called day, and darkness night, the first day. Verse 5. Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water. Verse 6. And God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. Verse 7. God called the expanse sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. Verse 8. Now in verse 9 and 10, God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. This was caused by a tremendous cataclysmic upheaval of the earth's surface, and the rising and the sinking of the land, which caused the waters to plunge into the low places, forming the seas, the continents, and islands, the rivers and lakes. Care of Job chapter 38, verse 4 to 11, and Psalms 104, verse 6 to 9. Job chapter 38, verse 4 to 11. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its waddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves have stayed. Psalms 104, verse 6 to 9. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they took to flight. The mountains rose, the valleys sank to the place that you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth. Moreover, what an amazing thing how God created the lands and seas. Later on, God will put more creatures in both land and sea. God will create two kinds of creatures. Number one, land creatures, and number two, the sea creatures. Some creatures can survive both inland and also in the sea. Verses 20 to 21, verses 25. Not only that, but also birds of every kind, trees of every kind, and everything that creeps. And last of all, God will create men and women that will steward both land and seas. What is the message of this verse? The message of this verse is that God is the one who created everything, including land and seas. We do not have any part in this creation, even we own a certain piece of land, or even owning some small boundaries of seas. Everything is from God, even our life. Moses encountered God in the burning bush. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 to 5. God said to him, do not come any closer. God said, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Exodus chapter 3, verse 5. To be clear, the ground is not holy, but it becomes holy because God is holy. And when you say holy, it means that God is distinct and different from everything and everyone else. Only God is holy. Holiness is His very nature. Psalms 24, verse 1 to 5. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. For He has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in His holy place? He who has clean hands and pure heart, who does not lift his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully, he will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. In application, who shall ascend at the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? The answer is, he who has clean hands and has a pure heart, who does not lift his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from God of his salvation. Psalms 24, verse 1 to 5. To end, the earth is the Lord's, and the world, and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the rivers. Indeed, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. Amen.